When stormwater rushes unchecked through our neighborhoods, it doesn't just erode our landscapes. It washes away our connection to the ecosystems we depend on. But what if congregations, schools, and community members could become the solution by planting native species, building rain gardens, and redefining beauty as something that sustains life? Hey everybody, I'm Stephen Schauer, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, where we explore the extraordinary journeys of people who are transforming our world through courage, compassion, and commitment. Today's episode is a powerful reminder that environmental stewardship isn't just about big policy changes. It starts in our backyards, in our places of worship, and in our hearts. We're joined by Bonnie Sorak, a woman whose path from the concrete jungle of Brooklyn to the lush forests of the environmental movement is nothing short of inspiring. You'll hear how her journey to veganism began with a desire to protect her children, how she co-founded a green team at her synagogue, and why she believes faith communities are uniquely positioned to lead the charge in environmental justice. Bonnie opens up about the power of emotional connection to nature, why community-based stormwater projects matter, and how every one of us, regardless of age, ability, or background, can play a role in sustaining the planet. Whether it's planting a single native flower or launching an interfaith coalition, Bonnie's message is clear. Small actions, taken together, create massive ripples of hope. Bonnie Sorak is the Director of Outreach for Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. A Brooklyn native, she holds degrees from Florida State University in communications, public relations, and political science. Bonnie has worn many hats throughout her career, from nonprofit work to real estate, but her enduring passion lies in advocacy, collaboration, and community building. Devoted vegan for nearly 3 decades and the mother of 4 boys, Bonnie has volunteered extensively in her children's schools and her congregation, where she led environmental initiatives for over 12 years. Since joining the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake in 2014, she's become a guiding force, helping congregations overcome barriers and cultivate sustainable futures through grassroots organizing and interfaith partnerships. Get ready to be inspired by how one woman's deep love for family, faith, and the planet blossomed into a movement that's helping entire communities use their faith to reconnect with the earth. One rain garden, one native plant, and one story at a time. Here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Good morning, Bonnie. Welcome to Stories Sustain Us. How are you today?
How are you?
I am doing well. Tell everybody where you are this morning. I'm in the Seattle area, and you're across the country on the East Coast somewhere, I think. So
I'm joining you from Ellicott City, which is a suburb of Baltimore. We're kind of between Baltimore and DC in Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay.
fantastic. I just had another guest on a short time ago talking about Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of, in that, a long history, decades of work being done to help clean up that bay. And I'm real excited to learn about the work that you and your organization are doing. But first, let's learn a little bit about you. Bonnie, what's your story? Where did you grow up, and what was your journey to get to being part of the Interfaith Partners organization in support of the Chesapeake Bay?
That's been a story. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so surrounded by cement, and so my exposure to nature as a young child was the ants that crawled across my sidewalk and whirly purly bugs, and so not a lot there in the city to enjoy, but I was also very blessed. My family got to spend our summers in the Catskill Mountains.
Oh, nice.
In a bungalow colony, so I was kind of a free range kid when we got up to the mountains, and so I have just really wonderful memories of we stopped going there when I was about 8 years old, so I had to be very young, just wandering in the woods and flipping over rocks and finding more whirly-purly bugs and thinking, well, how cool is that? They're here and they're in the city too, and making that connection. And
nice.
There used to be wild blueberries growing, so I have very fond memories of just sitting and picking and eating blueberries that were just there. So that's kind of where the love, I think, of nature started for me as a city girl, getting to have that nature experience. And
Sure.
then at one point, I was in elementary school, and I really don't know why. For people who are from New York, you know that schools don't have names. So I went to PS 52, and there was some special environmental program at PS whatever the next school over was.
Yeah.
And I guess my mom signed me up for it, so it was a big adventure that we would get to go. Like on Wednesday afternoons, we could walk from the one elementary school to the other elementary school to do this environmental workshop of some kind. And I have vague memories of that. But so there was something there that my mother noticed I was interested in and sent me to this. And I just remember the only thing I really remember from that experience was the theme of that class was at the time, and I make it the song "Big Yellow Taxi." So pay paradise and put up a parking lot. So that whole concept,
it's a great song.
That that lyric just really resonated with me as I was learning about butterflies and things that you shouldn't, and I living in a concrete city, that we shouldn't be paving paradise and we should be protecting paradise. So I kind of grew up with that as a young girl. So, but I think if you fast forward lots of years, so that was in the early 70s. I don't want to date myself, but that was in the early 70s. So that was right around when the first Earth Day happened. And so there was just a lot of, we were watching our rivers burn and just the, so all of that was part of that time of my life. So fast forward to about 30 years ago, when I was having my first child, I realized both my husband and I both had really severe allergies as children. And it had always been something that I heard, I was allergic to cow's milk and he was allergic to cow's milk. I had terrible asthma and allergies, specifically in the springtime. He had eczema, terrible eczema. So after we got married and we were having our first child, I was like, I don't want my children to have the same terrible allergies that I had when I was a child, and started researching and came across, read in several books that, the highest allergens, one of them is dairy. And so I said to my husband, maybe you should cut dairy out of your diet, and maybe that will help you with your eczema. So literally he was buying Band-Aids from Costco 100 at a time because he would have all of his fingers wrapped up in Band-Aids, right? And I was like, well, maybe you should try. I read this, and so he went off of dairy first, and within 3 weeks of going off dairy, his eczema that he'd had pretty much his whole life went away.
Wow!
And I was like, wow, that's really compelling, right? So we have our first child, and he had an allergic reaction to something. And so I dug deeper into it and ended up going to see a physician speak, a pediatrician speak. His name is Dr. Jay Gordon, and he was a proponent of a vegan diet for children. And so our child was 6 months old. I looked at my husband. I said, well, this makes sense to me. If you want to, avoid cancer and heart disease and all these other things and allergies, we should try this. And, if we're going to raise this child as a vegan, then we should be vegan too.
Probably join
my
along.
son, who's now 31 years old, his first birthday, we became vegan. And I've had 4 children, all boys. And for the most part, they didn't get any allergies. So you can't do a double-blind study on your kids, so there's no way to know if they would have had allergies if we hadn't done this. But what I know is that that lifestyle choice really had a positive benefit on our family.
Has been working for you and your family, absolutely, yeah.
So, and that was done for health reasons, right? So, but over time, if you're raising children in that way, there's a lot of other benefits to it. So, spiritual, ethical, environmental. So people say to me all the time, well, I don't think I would ever go back just because I've made this choice. I've done it now for 30 years. It's not something that I think I would go back on because I have so many other benefits other than trying to avoid those allergies. So going down that road led me, when my kids were in elementary school, we have GT programs, gifted and talented programs. They have special where I pull things out. And my kids, I guess having grown up this way, they tended to join the green teams at their schools. So I would support their, fifth grade green team efforts and things like that. So we did recycling and TerraCycling at their school and just kind of got involved in that. And then I got involved in the local food movement and ended up running a community-supported agriculture program for the PTAs at the schools that my kids were at, and then also my synagogue. I'm Jewish by faith, and I member of Columbia Jewish congregation. So we ran a community-supported agriculture program, which is for people who are not familiar. That's something where you're trying to buy food locally from a farm that's within 100 miles of where you live.
Sure.
So we had a wonderful program. It was sponsored by the PTAs. And the farmer that we chose donated for every 10 shares that we sold. They donated a share. So we were providing fresh food to the families in our community that couldn't afford to buy fresh food. So it had this wonderful community impact. And, that, was still within line of my choices, but got me into the whole local food movement. And I'm working through the PTAs and my synagogue. I also started a green team, or was the co-founder of a green team at my synagogue. And at the time I had 4 children under 9 years old. So I was like, the way that started is my synagogue held an environmental film series. So they held 3 films in a row, and they were held during Sunday school, or during when my older boys were in Hebrew school. So my youngest was 2 years old at the time. And so I took him along with me to watch the last movie. And at the end of the movie, the chair of the committee, which the committee that was running this program was called Tikkun Olam, which for Jewish people, that Tikkun Olam means repair the world. So it was the committee that works on trying to make positive change in the world. And at the end of the movie, the chair of the committee said, well, so now we see what all the problems are. As a congregation, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
And everyone looks around the room like, who's going to step up? And an older gentleman that I did not know, raised his hand and said, well, I'm willing to co-chair a committee. And I was like, oh, well, I can co-chair a committee too. So I can't do meetings and things like that because I've got little kids, but I can do things behind the scenes. So developed a really wonderful relationship with this person that I probably never would have interacted with, because he's easily 30 years older than I am. We're just in different stages of life.
Sure.
So I will say that one of the best things that happened in forming what we ultimately became Green Team for the congregation, and just having an intergenerational relationship within my own synagogue was so meaningful. It connected us in a way that I just had never was. It was a co-benefit, right, of doing this.
That's really beautiful.
He and I ran Dan Cohen. He and I ran the Green Team together, and then he ended up with some health issues, so he had to drop back. So I went from being the co-chair to being the full chair. And I was the chairperson or co-chairperson of the Green Team at my synagogue for 12 years. I don't recommend that. But we did wonderful things within my own faith community. So one of the funniest stories I have is, so I have a reputation of being someone who gets things done. So as co-chair, I was asked to we have a community Seder every year, and we have a community break the fast at Yom Kippur. And so they had asked me if
for those who may not be familiar with the Seder and those traditions, do you want to explain those real quick? Is that part of the story that this is so people can understand your faith tradition and the meaning behind those?
Yeah. So I'll start with Passover because it's starting this week. So Passover it comes from the story in the Bible when the Jewish slaves are freed from Egypt, and there's the 10 plagues, and Passover is the angel of death passing over our homes, and the tradition is to not eat leavened food. So we eat matzah, we don't eat bread, and you hold a Seder every year to retell the story of our liberation and freedom. So
Thank you.
I
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah.
So what I learned was, because of my vegan diet, our vegan diet, like, people are very skeptical about that. So that year I offered a all the food that I made for Seder, which there are traditional. Every family has traditional foods. Matzo ball soup probably being the most famous thing, right? Because we lots of chicken soup, matzo ball. I made matzo ball soup. But I had spent years perfecting vegan alternatives to the regular food, so I ended up offering to our community. We had an adult ed series of classes, and I offered matzo ball soup to nuts, and so I marketed it as a cholesterol-free dinner menu, because if you say something vegan, people don't they don't want it. But if you say something cholesterol-free, and a lot of people are worried about their cholesterol. People showed up, so I made all the food, and actually my co-chair came, and everyone had samples of all the food, and at the end of it, he said, "Wow, that was really delicious. Like, I had no idea." He's like, "I might be able to do this, right?" So people, help people to learn about.
Open their minds a little bit more to other options.
Oh, and by the way, it's vegan. It's cholesterol free, but it also means it's vegan, and so they
surprise.
So that's the Passover piece. But for Yom Kippur, that's in the fall. We have the Jewish holiday of the New Year, and then part of that is for Yom Kippur, we atone for our sins and fast for a day, and then you break the fast. And generally, the break the fast is what Jews would call a dairy meal, which means there's no meat. So it's usually bagels and lox and whitefish and things like that. So my synagogue hosted a community break the fast. And so this one year they asked me if I would coordinate the community break the fast. And I was like, sure. And so I did it. It was all vegan. So I made like a lox spread out of a lox substitute, lox of smoked salmon, and I made table tents that explained. This is back when, I don't know if you remember, the Wendy's campaign was "Where's the beef?" So I made table tents that said "Where's the lox?" and did on both sides of the table tents, like, the problems with farmed salmon and the environmental problems with catching wild salmon, and so we don't have lox, and explained why we don't have lox, and but everything else was delicious, and nobody went hungry. Well, they never asked me to do that again. And about 5 years later, my mom, who lived in Florida, moved up to be with close to her grandchildren in Maryland, and so she joined the synagogue as well. And so she was meeting people on her own. And so, they were like, "Who are you?" And she'd say, "Well, Bonnie Sorak's my daughter." And they're like, "Oh, Bonnie Sorak. She's the one that didn't let us have lox for break the fast." So 5 years had gone by. And what people remembered was that we didn't have lox at break the fast. So it was a good lesson in, you can make change, but there's only like certain traditions you just really have to be. Even though I gave them the explanation, and it did stick with them. Like, what they remembered was, I didn't let them.
No, those traditions, they have a lot of power and emotional connection to them, and
even I had a climate scientist on my green team, and he was upset about not having lox. I was like, really? You know better than, like, you know why we shouldn't have had lox. So anyway, so we started the green team, and then as my youngest child started school, I have older kids, so it was like, it's time to go back to work. And someone who had come through our green team, we had run a series. It was kind of like a book club light. It was called Menu for the Future, and so it was like a small book, and there were like articles, and it was a discussion circle. So once a week during Sunday school, the adults would come. They would have read the article, and then we would discuss the article. And it was all about food choices and agriculture and the climate impacts of all of that. So a woman who had come to that, who was from another synagogue, but she learned about this and came and participated in this class with me, Out of the blue, she forwarded me. I had mentioned to her, oh, it's probably time for me to go back to work. My youngest is in school now, and so I'd like to go work part time somewhere. And out of the blue, she sent me a little advertisement about this organization called Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake that I had never heard of before. I was like, well, I can look them up on Google, see what this, and they were looking for a part-time outreach coordinator. And she
Yeah.
said, I think you'd be perfect for this. And she sat on the advisory, or at the organization's advocacy committee. So that's how she was involved with the organization. And she sent it to me. She said, oh, I think you would be perfect for this job.
Yeah.
So I applied, and I got hired. That was 11 years ago. So I was hired as a part-time outreach coordinator, and just over time that just grew into full-time work, and I've been here 11 years. So
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that journey and how you got from Brooklyn to the position you're in now. And before we jump a little bit deeper into your work with the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, I want to back you up a little bit in time and learn a little bit more about your journey. So you started out in Brooklyn, and I understand from your bio that you also then eventually spent some time in Florida and then landed in this Baltimore area. Can you tell me a little bit about those transitions? And how did your life go from the streets of Brooklyn surrounded by concrete and the ants crawling on the ground to to Florida? What was that kind of transition like for you? And
it's interesting. So growing up in Brooklyn, I never wanted to drive a car because the drivers in New York City were just crazy,
sure.
Including my father. Like he'd make a left-hand turn from the right lane, and I was always nervous driving on the highways and everything.
Yeah.
But then in my junior year of high school, my mother and my stepfather, he retired and they moved to Florida, so I moved to Florida in my junior year of high school.
Okay,
and having been this free-range kid who could get around, I took public transportation, I walked to the city and all that. I ended up in Delray Beach, Florida. You can't go anywhere without a car.
Right, you get to the Sunbelt cities, you need a vehicle, right?
You have to have a car. So I got a license at 15 years old because it was like I couldn't stand being driven everywhere. That was suburbia was just not something that I was. Oh, Brooklyn is actually a suburb of the city, but it's still a city, right?
It's still, exactly.
City. So went to a couple of years of high school in Florida, and then went to college at Florida State in Tallahassee. My husband we met in high school. We went to different universities, and then when we both graduated, he got a job in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, so we moved there. And then after that, we moved to a suburb of Richmond, Virginia, and then after that, we got transferred up to the Baltimore area.
That's where you said it. Okay.
So that's how we landed here in Baltimore. I did work in Florida. I did a paper once on Oxbow Lakes, which is how the Army Corps of Engineers ruined them.
Yeah. Basically,
they changed the watershed.
Yeah.
My initial understanding of watersheds and all of that came from a college research that I had done on that, and but I did not know. When I moved here and took this job, I literally we focused on the problem of the stormwater runoff.
Sure. Yeah.
And I literally didn't know anything about it. So when I started the job, I was reading everything I could possibly read about stormwater runoff. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of your questions, but
no, this is
one of the things that really hit home. And people have recommended me read this book, and there was one book that I picked up and I read, and I got it at a used bookstore. It was written in the 1950s, and I was like, well, so we've known what the problem is since the 1950s, and yet we all hear. Every year the report card comes out on the Chesapeake Bay, and they have, there are improvements, but we still have a problem. And I'm like, so why do we still have this problem if we've known the science behind what the problem is, and we knew we know what can fix it? Why do we still have this problem?
Right.
And what I've come to learn over the 11 years is that the reason we still have this problem is even though scientists and professionals know what to do, it's really hard to get people to change their behavior and to understand what they do and how what they do impacts our natural environment. So while we can make gains, what we really need to do is to change people's hearts and minds so that they understand that they have a part to play, and that's what my organization really works on, is specifically with faith communities, is trying to get the faith communities to change their behavior. So often I will, when I go into a congregation, and if it's a Judeo-Christian congregation, I'll do a visualization with them and say, close your eyes, picture the Garden of Eden, and maybe read the beginning of Genesis and how, God created the heavens and the earth, and go through that, and then say, okay, so open your eyes and tell me what you saw in the Garden of Eden. And they'll say, they saw an apple tree, right? We all know there's an apple tree in the Garden of Eden.
Sure.
There's a
snake,
there's a, right? What do we see in the Garden of Eden? And so we'll go through, there's trees, there's birds, there's flowers, there's water. I'm like, well, did you see a parking lot?
Yeah.
Did you see
paved paradise, right?
So,
goes back to the song.
So we've, so God, or whatever entity you believe in, created a beautiful, perfect world, and people have come in and changed that world, and it's those changes that are creating the problem. So we have there's a moral responsibility to fix that problem. Like every religion has, a reverence for the natural world and the preservation of the natural world, not just for us, but for future generations. Like that's pretty much baked into every faith tradition. So in order for us to gather and be a congregation and worship in whatever way we're going to worship, we've created a problem. And so what are we going to do about that problem? So our organization really spends our time and efforts in trying to help them understand their contribution to the problem, and then help them to find resources to mitigate the problems that they're causing. So we work with our technical partners and things to do site assessments to say, here's where your impervious surfaces are. This is where, this is how you can fix it. You can put in a rain garden, you can put in a cistern, you can plant trees, you can plant native plants to make your, lawns are terrible, plant native plants, right? So these are the things that you can do at your congregation to improve the situation. But then it's also, and that's all great, and we focus on that, and a lot of the deliverables that we have for the grants that we get are all based on doing those implementation of those in the ground projects to have an actual water quality benefit. But what we really want to do is change people's hearts and minds. We want them to learn what they're going to learn at the trusted space of their congregation, and then say, oh, well, I just planted some trees at my congregation. I have a space in my backyard. I can go plant a tree. Or I may not have space to plant a tree, but I can have a native a plant that's going to be good for pollinators on my front porch stoop or on my my back balcony or something. Everybody can do something. So what we try to do is educate them enough so that the people can make whatever change they're willing to make, and that if all of us make some changes, we should have a positive.
Absolutely. I love that. And there's a few, I think, technical things that you've shared in the last few minutes that I want to back up and just make sure the audience members, because I'm right there with you every step of the way. I'm like, this is all great, but I want to make sure people who may not have, your experience or my experience, that understand what we're talking about, and a couple of things that I think you mentioned that are worth kind of slowing down and explaining a little bit for folks. And, you mentioned the term, stormwater management and impervious services and parking lots. And, some folks who may not fully understand, well, what's the problem with all this, right? I need a place to park my car when I go shopping, or, if my house needs a roof on it, or, what are the problem with all these things? And for those who may not fully have a deeper grasp of the science yet behind all this, is there's pollutants on these hard surfaces, these impervious surfaces. There's, on our roadways, there's pollutants from our tires and, oil and gases and anything else that can be there on our roofs and our parking lots. There's, bird waste and other things that have bacteria in them. So when it rains, that stormwater runoff, that rain's got to go somewhere. and it's picking up all of those pollutants from those hard surfaces and generally ending up in the nearest creek, which eventually ends up in the nearest river, and eventually, in your case, ends up in the Chesapeake Bay. And when you're in a highly urbanized area, like around the Chesapeake Bay, you can have this wonderful natural ecosystem and resource then become so terribly polluted that it's something that's not healthy for the fish and wildlife that need it, but it's so unhealthy that humans can't interact with it either. So everything that you're talking about, rain gardens and cisterns, these are all these really simple ways that are allowing us to mimic nature in our developments, that we can still have our urban environments and our communities with all the amenities that we've come to appreciate, but we're trying to mimic nature a little bit, where we can slow the water down, we can capture it, we can allow it to filter through a garden, a pretty area, planted with native species that are to that area, which are then helpful for the habitat and the birds and the critters that live in that area. So super excited about everything you just described. I just thought we should slow down a little bit and make sure that people understand what it is you're talking about, because you're talking about some incredibly important stuff that is not just relevant to Chesapeake Bay, but it's wherever you are in urban, wherever in the world. These are practices that we should all be looking at implementing, structurally in our communities, supporting those policymakers to make sure that our developments are happening that way. But as you also pointed out, you can do it in your own yard. I don't have a yard, but I've planted, native plants on my back little apartment, porch, so I can still support pollinators. So there's little things we can all do. And it sounds like that's the message that you're sharing. And I think it's a really powerful and important message. So did I capture everything correctly from your perspective as well?
Absolutely. Just a couple of things. So the problems are not only with what's in the water, it's at the velocity of the water.
Yes.
So with more and more development, there's more and more runoff. It comes down and up, and then we have bigger storms than we used to have. So for folks that may have heard, like in Ellicott City, we've had 2,000-year floods, one in 2016 and one in 2018. My husband and I actually were in one of those floods. We lost a car in the flood. There were over 300 cars lost in the flood. Then the one in 2016, 2 people died. And the one in 2018, another individual drowned. So, flood waters and these incidences, you just have to watch the news to see that there's more and more flooding. So we have cycles of droughts and floods. So everything is just more intense than it used to be. And our systems are not set up for that. So they get overwhelmed really easily. So the quantity, the intensity and the quantity of the water that's coming down is greater than it used to be. And it's also hotter than it used to be. So our local streams, like the numbers and type, and I'm not a scientist. I've picked up things along these over my life in these 11 years. But so if the water is warmer, then it doesn't support the same life that the invertebrate and things that need cooler waters, the species that need cooler waters, like all of that is affected. So that whole circle of life is affected by the changing of how our storms are coming and the quantity and how warm the water is. So that has a huge impact on your local stream and then ultimately whatever's downstream from there.
Absolutely.
So anything that you can do to help. So the term that we use all the time is slow it down, spread it out, sink it in. Right.
Yes.
So if you can capture, so why do you have a rain barrel? Why do you have a cistern? Why do you have a rain garden? It's to get that runoff from your roof or the driveway or whatever it is, capture it. So in the storm, it's not racing really fast. You're holding on to it, and then you slowly release it after the storm is over, so that the whole program, process isn't overwhelmed in that storm. So if you slow it down, the whole idea of rain gardens is to get it spread out and let it sink in over time. So that's what we work with, trying to get helping having people understand. And so native plants and things like that help because they have longer root systems than non-native plants do. So they help to soak up that water. They help to prevent erosion. So there's so many different co-benefits to planting native plants. So this is something, so we do have about proselytizing religion. We proselytize about how lawns are bad, grass is a green desert. We call it, it's a green desert.
Sure.
If you look at and a lot of congregations have these great, big, beautiful lawns that they're very proud of. And so we come in and say, it's a total mind shift of, what is beautiful? What does God think is beautiful? So if you look at this lawn that we love so much, and there's no life there. You don't see bugs, you don't see butterflies, you don't see birds. It's just a beautiful look. It's a beautiful
big
lawn,
monoculture, right?
But it's not sustaining life. So congregations have this unique opportunity that they control a lot. Many control a lot of property. So do you know who the largest private landowner is in the world?
Probably the Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church, right? So they, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's all these churches that own all this property. What are we going to do to show respect, to show love? We say love thy neighbor. When we say love thy neighbor, that includes monarch butterflies and
what we're sharing,
and hummingbirds, and right. So how are we going to make it our community welcoming, not just to people and be loving and kind to people, but how are we also going to, because we don't exist. If humans went away, everything else would be fine. But if everything else goes away, we will not be fine. So we've got to help. I just read an article yesterday about the bee population, which we've all been watching. It just had a terrible winter, and like billions of bees. So if we don't have bees, we don't have food. Right. So we all have interconnectedness. We all have to take care of this. It's just they're just as important in the realm of religion. Like those creatures are just as important as people are, and we have to care. We have to show the same care for them that we care for each other. So it's an expression of love, and how you manifest that love has to be for all creatures, not just, well, it should be for each other too, but it should be for all of us.
Of course. And I appreciate what you just said, and I think it ties into something you said earlier about how you're trying to reach people's hearts and minds. I mean, we have all of this scientific facts, the data we just talked about what stormwater is, and just the cold hard facts of science. But to your point earlier, that's not what's going to move people into action. It's important. We need that knowledge. We need those data and those facts so we can understand our actions and consequences of doing something or not doing something. But what really moves people to go do something more than facts and figures and data, it's an emotional charge. It's how we see the world and view the world from our emotional selves. And religion has such a powerful hold on our emotional lives, for better or for worse. And you just talked about how do we love each other, and how do we, that's an emotional world. That's not about stormwater. That's about, what's inside us and moves us into action. So can you talk a little bit now? It seems like a good transition to jump into some of the work that the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake that you're doing. How do you tell these stories where you can weave in the facts and figures that are relevant, so people are making better decisions based on good information, but you're moving them into action by storytelling. And you already shared one example of imagining the Garden of Eden. These are, again, that's an emotional opportunity to get somebody connected to something. So can you talk a little bit more about the work? I know you've got several different programs that you do, and would love to learn more about what the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake are doing, and how you're tapping into that spirit of congregations to help encourage them into healthier actions for the world.
Yes. So I would start with our basic tenet for how do we get work done, right? And in a congregational framework, it's done by committee or ministry, right? So we work with congregations. Often we identify a single individual who's motivated and wants to do something. We affectionately refer to them as lone green sheep. So nice. Here you are, you're the lone green sheep in your congregation, and you want to make change. How are you going to go about doing that? So one of our flagship programs is called Faithful Green Leaders Training. And so the idea is that we work with that individual to help them to build a green team or a creation care ministry. We've got lots of different congregations calling their ministries like green teams, or they come up with all kinds of creative names, but care for creation in some way. So we help them, we take them through a leadership training program to get their ministry up and running, and how to build that team, how to get people to surround you, and then how to discern what action do we want to take. And that is different for every congregation. And like I said, we have a list that we call our menu for action. We work in the different municipalities where we have grant funding to work. We've worked with the municipalities to find out what their goals are as far as either they have a climate action plan or some sort of small watershed improvement plan. We work with those municipalities to find out what their goals are, and we find other partners, usually local watershed groups that are protecting their local watershed and that have some expertise in doing in the ground work, partnering with landscape designers, master gardeners, all those, what resources are available in your community. And then we've developed what we call our menu for action, and it's broken down into 3 categories. We have forming actions, which are basic, just education, raising awareness for your congregation. So sometimes we'll do a Bible study. We mentioned the Catholic Church that the Pope has an encyclical called Our Common Home, and might do a study based on that. So trying to ground it within their religious faith, to using their own scriptures. So it's their own, what they're used to hearing, but maybe from a different angle. And working with their clergy, pastors, rabbis, imams, to help them with, what are your favorite scriptures or verses that are in your religion that you can raise up the environment as something to care for. So those forming, that's a forming action. Then we have caring actions, which I said that's where you get dirty. It's digging in the dirt, planting the trees, planting the gardens, putting in the cisterns, the actual, like, how we're going to actually affect water quality. So helping them with those things, resourcing them, finding them funding for tree plantings. We also include invasive species removal. That's another thing. So if you don't own your building, you can still go to we train you, and you can go to a public park and help. Invasive species are everywhere. Learn how to trim back the English ivy and all those things that are killing our trees that we already have. So those are the caring actions. And then we have going forth actions, which take a lot of the forming actions, but takes it outside of the congregations, because what we talked about is we want the congregation to change their behavior and make improvements, teach their congregants to make similar changes, but it is also to be that that guiding force within the community to show the way and invite other people in. So if a congregation installs a cistern, we'll often include in that grant that they'll do a rain barrel workshop. And so the watershed group will come in, we give away 10, 20 rain barrels, invite people from the neighborhood association, come and learn about, well, this is what we did. We put it in the cistern, and you can help too if you install a rain barrel. We'll show you how to do it and how to maintain it, right? So that's bringing people that won't necessarily be congregational members. They're from the community. One of my own congregation, I'll just brag on my congregation.
Please do.
We have an awesome green team. So they have worked. We are within walking distance of a middle school and a high school. So we help the middle school plant a garden. We help, right? So we can help some of the students that are in the it's a Youth Climate Institute. They have a chapter at their school. So some of their kids, their project was to build bat boxes, because we have, bats are an important part of our ecosystem. So they build bat boxes, and we have bat boxes that they put up. So we're working. So we're going outside the congregational walls into the community, and then growing environmentalists. We've got to get kids when they're young. They love to dig in the dirt. So we have work days at the congregation. We have, I've lost count, 7, 8, 9 rain gardens, native plant gardens, bioretention areas. We're trying to treat all the stormwater runoff that we create, both in our parking lots and our roofs. So we keep adding all these gardens. And we have a youth every third Sunday, I think it is, where kids as young as 2 years old are invited to come with their parents and dig in the dirt and water the trees and plant the plants and trim the trees. And so it's really been a wonderful example of how you can, um, get other people involved in the work.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of our, so we have a larger program that we're piloting there because we have 5 different congregations in the same county, and they all have rain gardens, but they struggle to maintain them. Like they take maintenance.
Sure.
So we've started a kind of a pay it forward flash mob of gardeners. It's like, so
Oh, nice.
we're going to have a work day here, but having raised 4 kids, it's like some days you could, you have 5 baseball games and you can't get right. But then next week we have nothing going on. So if we have nothing going on, what am I going to do with my kids? Oh, well, this other church is doing it. I couldn't go to my congregation's work day, but I can go and I'm welcome to go help this other congregation with their rain garden. So it's kind of a pay it forward maintenance model. So we call that garden guarding. Anyway, so with our Faithful Green Leaders training, we get those teams up and running, creation care ministries up and running, and help them discern what action are we going to take, and then resource them with those actions. And on an annual basis, it's like, well, if you accomplish that, what are you going to do next? And and so we're there for them as they accomplish their goals and move on to the next thing, and help them discern what they want to do and find the resources to do that. So that's through our Faithful Green Leaders training. Yeah. And our other flagship program is called the Stormwater Partnership. And so what I've just described to you is congregations working on an individual basis of the congregations doing this work. And what we envision is a network of congregations trying to tackle maybe bigger issues within their community. So environmental injustice, where there's bad pollution or something like that we need multiple congregations working together or to interchange to have an influence on policy of some kind. So our advocacy efforts started in Baltimore City. I don't remember what year it was, but we had a congregation. They planted all their trees. They put in rain gardens. They pretty much we greened everything we can possibly green. Now what do we do? And so they're like, we want to turn our sights on systemic change. Like, if we really, this is all great, but how do we make systemic change? We make systemic change by influencing policy in some way. So teaching congregations that it's okay for you to advocate on behalf of God's creation. Like, so people are worried about the 501c3 status and all of that. So teaching them that advocacy is okay, that we can speak up. And so the first, our first foray into advocacy was about a plastic bag fee in Baltimore City. So it was actually one of our congregations, a Catholic congregation, that started a letter writing campaign to write to the city council to say we think there should be a fee on plastic bags. So that was that effort. Ultimately, we got a plastic bag fee in Baltimore City, and now that has gone to other counties as well. And I can report, because I just did a stream cleanup with my congregation this past Sunday, there were very little plastic bags. Like it used to be when you did a stream cleanup, you would find tons of plastic bags. And absolutely. Now there's fewer of them. They're not all gone, but there's way fewer of them. You drive around, you don't see so many plastic bags flying in the trees.
In the trees,
right? So so taking action literally resulted in a positive benefit for everyone. I will say we're currently working on a bottle fee in Maryland. We've been trying for years to get a bottle fee passed. We don't have it yet. I wish you could see at the cleanup we did on Sunday the number of bottles and cans and water. It's overwhelming. It is overwhelming. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing, and so this was our first year. The bill got out of committee, which is in Maryland. That's the first step to actually so now next year, hopefully we come back. Hopefully we'll get enough pressure. When the faith community speaks up to local politicians, they listen, right? Yeah. So if the faith community is behind this, then maybe I can vote for it, and maybe I won't get so much pushback.
Yeah. Well, and what I think I'm hearing you say as well, when you're referencing a congregation, but this is of different faith structures. So this is, so that adds that even more powerful to the policy making if it's, it's a variety of faith traditions coming together to support a particular policy initiative or particular type of direction that they want to see the community go in. It's not just isolated amongst just this church or just this faith. I mean, the whole, I think, power behind what you and your organization are doing is bringing these different faith traditions together to create a unified voice, even though you may pray differently and may have your unique understandings of how you understand God or how you understand, whatever the meaningful parts of your faith tradition may be. There's common ground we can all stand on, and there's that commonality when we come together is powerful, and that's what I see that's what your organization is doing, and that not only I'm imagining, and please correct me if my storytelling in my brain is wrong, but this bringing of congregations together around stormwater issues and other green issues, environmental issues, then starts to have a larger social benefit as well, beyond just because you're connecting people, you're making, you're breaking down those barriers between those false barriers of why I don't believe the way you believe, so I'm going to stay over here with my group, and you're breaking those down, which is, I think, better for the whole community beyond just making it healthier environmentally. I think you're making it a big difference in how we treat each other and socially issues. So am I imagining that? Did I make that up in my head, or is...
I was like, I had to write notes because there's 3 different things I want to respond to you about on this.
Great.
So the first was so that when we ask our participants, when we do an interfaith nature walk, often when we do an interfaith nature walk, we'll ask people to bring a favorite scripture from their faith tradition that they would like to share with everyone, or I'll go, because sometimes that makes people nervous, so I'll go with a bowl with different verses from different traditions, and people just pull it out and they just read it, right?
Sure.
But overall, what people say at the end is, so my husband says, oh, it sounds like I'm telling a bad joke, but I'll say, like, how was your event? I was like, oh, I had a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, a Sikh, and a Buddhist, and they were all together. He's like, well, they walk into a bar together? No, they didn't walk into a bar, but they came to an interfaith nature walk together, and they shared, and what they all come away saying is what they valued most was meeting people of a different faith,
the connection,
and realizing that, oh, we have the same value, like the value is the same. It's just it's a different story. It's a different,
it's just packaged a little differently.
Yeah, it's just packaged. That's the first thing. So the interfaith piece of that is what people really are craving and wanting.
Wonderful.
The other one is one of our congregations that suffered terribly in the 2 floods that I mentioned earlier in West Baltimore. And they came to understand that they were part of the problem. They have a huge parking lot that was not being treated, and they owned 10 acres of woods that, because of the invasive emerald ash borer, most of the forest that they had been ash trees, and so the forest had basically died. So that was contributing to the floodwaters, because if you don't have a living forest, there's no water uptake. Right. So their property was contributing to the flooding that was happening within their community, but they didn't know anything about it. Right. So they've come to learn about this, and they are just a beautiful example. We have a wonderful video about. And the first time I walked the property with the pastor in 2018, right after the second flood. And he said, there's a pool of water they have a stream that runs through the property, and there's a pool of water in the stream. And he said, someday I want to baptize people in this stream. And I was with one of the watershed groups, and we're looking at each other going, that runoff is really, we're never going to be able to baptize people in this stream. Well, that last October, he baptized 11 people in that stream, that they've gotten to the point where they've been able to do that. So that, that's a tremendous thing. But what he says is, so they have a tremendous amount of volunteer activity that's going on, just to clean the dead wood out and make the trails and planting, doing pollinator meadows, and just a tremendous amount of work is happening there. Green workforce development, summer camps for kids. It's just a very vibrant place. But when they, they put out a call to action to have volunteers show up to help them with whatever planting is happening, whatever, like he said, this is the most desegregated place because it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter, right? Everyone is welcome here, and everyone feels loved when they come here. They're cared for when they come here, and there's this connection happening here. It doesn't matter what your background is, right? We're all working on the same thing. We have the same goal in mind, and everyone comes away spiritually lifted by doing this work together.
That warms my heart. That's so beautiful.
And I don't know if we're coming up on time, but there's one other. So you mentioned
please,
before.
Okay. Please, one more. Yeah, absolutely.
So when I first started this work, the internet was relatively new. It was newish, right? And so we had a project that was supposed to be in Anne Arundel County, and had heard from somebody, and they were like, "Oh, they're from St. Andrew by the Bay," and they wanted me to call them back. So I Google St. Andrew by the Bay, and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call them, and I was like, that's a weird area code. Like, I don't recognize that area code. And I realized that St. Andrew by the Bay was on the San Francisco Bay. It wasn't on the Chesapeake Bay. It was all the way out in California.
Yeah.
And it made me think, well, probably the San Francisco Bay is probably not in that much better shape than the Chesapeake Bay.
Probably not.
At the time, I was housing 2 Chinese exchange students for a couple of weeks, and they were from Xinjiang Bay in China.
Probably also not very healthy.
What's that bay like? Like, right? It's an industrial area. Like, what's that water quality like? So, in general, like, I'm pretty sure there could be an Interfaith Partners for the fill in the blank bay.
Exactly.
So everywhere could use this sort of interfaith effort of people of faith with their moral calling and convictions, leading the way to show other people this is how you take care of your local watershed. This is how you can be a part of the healing, right? Our communities need healing. But the other part of this is, we hear all the time how people are suffering from loneliness and depression, and well, it's really hard to feel lonely and depressed when you're planting a garden or you plant. Like, it is truly one of the most hopeful things you can do is to plant a tree, right? Because
be out in nature.
There's a edict within the Jewish religion where a 70-year-old man is planting a carob tree, and the passerby says, "Well, you're an old man. A carob tree doesn't grow carob. Like, it takes 50 years to, like, you're never going to see the carob. Why are you planting this carob tree?" And the answer is, and he says, "Well, my grandfather planted them for me, so I plant them for the future." Right? So we all have that. So that in Judaism we call it the door from generation to generation. We have that obligation, and so this is how we pass that on, and this is how we improve things for people in the future.
Yeah, I'd love that, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing that story, and thank you so much for all the stories you've shared and all the work that you're doing. I do want to be respectful of your time this morning as well. I could keep talking with you about all of this because it's so fascinating, and I'm really grateful for all that you're doing and your message that you just a moment ago said this type of interfaith work can be happening anywhere, and it should be happening everywhere. And I'm hopeful that your message gets out, and if it's not happening in other communities, that someone hears this and takes that spark of passion from you and starts it in their community, because it's really in a world that's so divisive and easy to point what makes us different. We need these real passionate efforts to bring us together, and I'm really excited about having you on the show to share that message. So thank you.
So our mission is to inspire and equip people of faith to honor, restore, and respect our shared watershed. So I would just say our Faithful Green Leaders training that I mentioned earlier, that is virtual. We hold it twice a year. The next one will be in October. Certainly, our target is for people who live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed to attend that. That's the silver lining of being, a virtual training. We have people come. The watershed starts in Cooperstown, New York, and is all the way to Virginia. 6 states, 18 million people. We estimate there's 19,000 congregations in the watershed, and we would hope that everyone would have an environmental committee, group, green team of some kind. So we welcome everyone to come. But we've had people come from other watersheds, right? We've had people from California attend Faithful Green Leaders training because they're like, how are you doing that? So anyone can come. We're happy to have, so if you want to get started and help your watershed, I had someone from Colorado come. He's like, how do you do this? I'm like, well, come and see how we do this. Like, this is something that can and should happen everywhere. And we're helping. We can't provide as much support. Obviously, if you're out of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, that's who we're mostly working with. But we're happy for anyone else to replicate the model to make a change in the world.
Wonderful. And that's a great transition then to a call to action for you. In addition to coming to this training in October, which I'll make sure your website is on our show notes page so folks can come and learn about you and maybe register for that as well. But what's your call to action for folks, Bonnie, now that people have heard this episode or watched it and are hopefully feeling inspired by the amazing work that you're doing there in Chesapeake Bay? How can people continue to support your organization, or what do you want people to do wherever they may be listening to or watching to this? So what's your call to action for folks?
2 days. You gave me the opportunity, so I'll say, obviously, we accept donations. Please. Go to our website and donate to support this work. But I would say, you mentioned at the head of the show, we did have a big event this past week. We featured climate scientist Katherine Hayhoe as our speaker, and I would just reiterate something that she highlighted in her talk, which I really resonated with everyone in the room, is that people are worried, right? So we've gotten past the point people pretty much accept that climate change is real and that it has an effect, and they're worried about it.
Yeah.
But they don't talk about it. And they specifically, our faith leaders don't necessarily talk about it. And so my call to action is, don't just keep your worry to yourself. Talk to other people about how you're worried, and then find the organizations that can help you do something about it, right? So it's like, we can all be worried, but worrying, I'm a Jewish mother, like, we're worried, there's guilt, there's all that. But one of my favorite Jewish sayings is we need to start the work. You're not responsible for finishing it, but you have to start. Right?
Yeah, I love
that. So
start
the work. You will feel better, right, if you start the work. So there's local watershed groups. There may not be an Interfaith Partners for the fill in the blank near you, but there's a watershed group. There's someone planting trees. There's someone doing community gardening. They all need help. Right? So learn about invasive species. Like, we spend a lot of time planting new trees, and we need to plant new trees, but we have to take care of the trees that we have. Like, so when a 100-year-old tree dies, it takes 100 years to grow a new one. So take care of the ones that you have. Learn how there's weed warrior programs and things like that. So even if you don't own property and you're an apartment dweller, you can learn to be a weed warrior and go out and take care of your local park. So we take care of the places that we love. So what you love, find out what the problem is at the place that you love, and learn how to be a better steward of it. Everyone can do that. Everyone can do that. So that would be my call to action, is find the thing that you can do and do it.
Brilliant. Love it. So thank you for that, Bonnie. And so now let's talk about hope a little bit here in the last few minutes that we've got. I love your energy. That's a brilliant call to action, and I love it. But I also want to know about what your hopes for the future are. And when we talk about hope on this show, I really refer to hope not as the pink cloud kind of emotional kind of thing, but more of the cognitive science thing, that hope isn't really emotion. It's what's going on in your brain. We have hope when we have a vision for a better future, and we know that there's something we can do about it. There's action, there's steps we can take, and we feel some sense of agency that I might not be able to do it all by myself, but there's something I can do. So hope is a real cognitive place. It's not just a fuzzy, fun emotion to have. So when I ask you about hope, I've got 3 questions for you about hope, and I want to kind of learn about your hopes for the future from that cognitive perspective a little bit, and then we're going to tie in the emotions to it as well, because as we talked earlier, we don't do anything without our emotions driving us into action. So the first question for you, Bonnie, and just kind of speak from the heart, if you will. Don't think too much about the answer, but what is your vision for a better future? It could be for you personally or professionally or for the world. What's your vision for a better future?
So I think I'll go back to the model of people coming together to take action. But that's the most hopeful thing that and I ended our talk last week with the market lead quote of, it's always a small group of committed people that change the world, right? So what's the change? What's the thing that's bothering you the most? Find out what that is and figure out how you can affect change in whatever way that is, even if it's just standing together and pulling the weed together, or that it's just when we get together, it's the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
So
So the second question, I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I want to give you a chance to expand on the answer a little bit. So your hope for a future is people coming together to take action. Why is that your vision for a better future?
inaction is not going to get us anywhere. Right? So if we all stay inside and curl up and wait for somebody else to do it, it's not going to happen. So, and everybody can do something. So, I get a lot of, well, I'm old, I can't dig any holes, I'm not going to do that. Well, you can pick up the phone and make a phone call to your legislature and tell them, right, it takes 30 seconds and you have a phone. So everyone can do something. Just find out the thing that we can do and do it.
Perfect. So the last question then, now we're getting into the emotional part of this. Imagine the future you just described where people are coming together, finding common ground to stand together and taking action, whatever that action may be. Imagine that's the future we're living in, that's happening right now. How does that make you feel?
Right? There's everyone has a rain barrel or a rain garden, and there's no more invasive species killing our trees, and we're just all working together, and it's all worked. And now we have a beautiful world that's healthy and vibrant and sustains life, and we can all enjoy. We can breathe clean air and not worry about what's in the water, and live a freer, be free and to enjoy it all. Like, so instead of looking at all that's bad, we're like, wow, this is great, right? So getting to enjoy what all these wonderful gifts that have been bestowed on us that we are responsible for, that we've taken control and made it better, improved it and done away with bad stuff, and all we have left is the good stuff.
Love it. Thank you, Bonnie, so much for joining me on Stories Sustain Us. I really appreciate your time, and I really am grateful for the amazing work that you're doing to make the world a better place. I'll leave you with the last words if you want to say anything before we head out today.
Site, tons of resources there, all free action kits, blessings, all of our trainings, and reach out if you have any questions. We're always happy to try to help people make the world a better place.
What an incredible conversation we've had today with Bonnie Sorak. From her early days in Brooklyn to summers in the Catskills that sparked her love for nature, Bonnie's journey has taken her through parenthood, veganism, community organizing, and ultimately to her role as Director of Outreach at Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We learned about the importance of stormwater management, how congregations can create life-sustaining landscapes, and how even the smallest actions, like planting native species, can ripple outward to create lasting change. What truly stood out to me in this episode was Bonnie's unwavering compassion and her ability to connect religious faith with environmental stewardship in such a meaningful and inclusive way. In a time when divisions feel deeper than ever and the lines between politics and religion often feel very blurred, Bonnie and the team at Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake are offering a different path, one of collaboration, shared values, and hope. It's encouraging, even healing, to witness how people of different faiths are coming together through their traditions to find common ground, honor creation, and protect the planet we all call home. So grateful for the work Bonnie is doing to educate congregations, foster interfaith dialogue, and inspire collective action. I want to thank Bonnie for coming on the show and for her tireless efforts to make this world a better, more sustainable place for all. To our audience, Bonnie's story is a powerful reminder that every one of us can be a steward of the earth. Whether it's starting a green team in your faith community, planting native plants in your yard, advocating for better stormwater practices in your community, or simply having a conversation that opens someone's heart to environmental justice, your actions matter. If you're looking for a place to start, I encourage you to visit Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's website to explore their inspiring programs and resources. There's so much to learn from their work and even more ways you can get involved. So thank you very much for joining me today. If you found Bonnie's story inspiring, please share this episode with your family and friends. Like and follow the show wherever you listen, and leave me a comment. I love hearing from you. And don't forget to come back for the next new episode on May 6th. Where I'll be joined by a gifted musician whose work invites us to be guided by our emotions and by ecological processes, helping us build deeper, more meaningful relationships with ourselves, our communities, and the earth itself. You can catch the next episode of Stories Sustain Us on May 6th at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Keep doing what you can do to make the world a better place. Till next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.